Okay, so I am going to now hand over to Jayne, who's going to talk to us about a subject that's dear to all of our hearts in both kind of ways, both in positive and, let's also be honest, the joy of working with volunteers as well. But Jayne's going to talk about how to look after young volunteers. Thank you. Thanks, Jayne.
Great, thank you very much. Hello, everybody. I think that works, doesn't it? Great. So my name is Jayne Cartwright. I have worked in and with charity shops since leaving university nearly 30 years ago. Can you believe that? So I started my career as an Oxfam shop manager, managing a traditional Oxfam shop in Reading, and then opened a vegetarian cafe in the basement, so already looking beyond traditional at that point. And since then have gone on and worked with a lot of the big players. I was head of retail at Save the Children, and we've already had a number of conversations with people in this room about the Mary Porter's TV shows and the the Marmite effect of that. I set up a Charity Retail Consultancy 6 years ago because I felt that there was still so much more that we could do. And as the sector has grown and grown and grown to approximately 10,000 shops now, we're a big player on the high street. And we need to keep looking beyond traditional. So that's very much about what I'm about, whether it was a vegetarian cafe or running pop-up shops or whatever else, but not just looking at the straightforward stuff, but where are the next opportunities, where are the next big wins for all of us. And in the last couple of years, I've been working with a charity called V Inspired. I don't know if anybody knows V Inspired, but they're a young people's volunteering charity. They were set up about 8 years ago when the government realised that young people weren't volunteering as much as they should and as much as they wanted them to. And so V Inspired, called V then, was set up. And then in the last couple of years, they've been very keen to look at how they could really engage young people. So that's something I've been involved in with them over that period of time. So because of that, Elizabeth asked me to come along and talk specifically about that experience. But I also wanted to talk a bit more broadly about the benefits and the challenges of, or some of them, as I see them, of working with young people. And very finally, before I go and to sort of show my slides, just to say, as I've said, it was important to me at 21, as a young person, working with a team that were all above the age of 60, mostly above the age of 70, and some more than 80. It was important to me then to embrace what they had to offer, but also to reach out to the other potential volunteers who weren't joining. And then more recently, as a mum of 3, but the 2 older ones who are teenagers, to give them opportunities to get involved in volunteering and to do that through shops, because young people love shopping and they love fashion. And 40% of the retailers in the UK are under the age of 25, which is quite an amazing statistic. But most of them find it really hard to get their first job because they don't have any experience. So bringing them into the charity retail sector is a great way of giving them those opportunities for them to learn those skills, but also for them to give something back to the charity that they're choosing to work with. So that's my introduction. So for me, why is it important to recruit younger volunteers? Well, I think it's about safeguarding your future, basically. And I think I could just stop there and finish, because you cannot rely on the older generation forever. So we have, and I have got such great friends from the older generation, and always have done through my career, who are brilliant charity shop volunteers. But we all know they get older, and their time with us will come to an end at some point. And unless you've got those younger people coming through the ranks and filling their shoes and taking on the other opportunities that are out there, unless you've got that, then your charity shop or shops could actually grind to a halt. So it really is that important, I think. Also, young volunteers have so much to give. They have time and they have skills. Now, in terms of time, I think young people in that sort of up to 25-year-old, that generation, yes, they go to college, or yes, they may work, but quite often they do have free time in there as well. They're not usually at college from 9 till 5. And if they're working, they're often these days working in a variety of part-time roles, and they do have time available apart from that. So they do have time to give, and they don't generally have caring responsibilities. So if you compare them to the older generation who maybe have retired, they're often engaged in all sorts of other things as well. Younger people are pretty much an untapped resource for charity shops. So they have the time and they also have the skills. So, I was talking to people in my workshop this morning, and there's all sorts of skills that I think we need in every shop, and whether that is the brilliant social media, which is such an opportunity, and so few of our shops are really embracing that. And I know if I gave my phone to any of my children, they could do everything 10 times quicker than I could, and I try to keep up, and I am active on Twitter, etc. But they're so much better than I could ever be, because they've grown up with it. So all of that whole new technology side, they are experts in, and we should be harnessing their skills. Visual merchandising, they're looking at all the fashion magazines, they're looking at everything on the YouTube and the Instagram accounts. They know what's in, and they know how to do it. So why aren't they dressing your windows week in, week out? Young people bring, I've said, a fresh and youthful dynamic to your shop. They really do. It changes the scene when a young person's volunteering there. Sometimes it can be more challenging if they look different or behave differently, or maybe they're tempted to be on their phone while they're behind the till. But that's a training issue that you can deal with. But they absolutely do bring a new, fresh dynamic to the shop. And they can get involved in all sorts of roles in that shop that they will be better at than you will. And as well as being involved as volunteers, they attract more of the same. And that's the same for any of our shops. If our shops are full of 70-year-olds plus, they tend to sell 70-year-old plus clothes. They tend to reject some of the more high fashion and designer items. They tend to play music that's more akin to what they like. The shop tends to be dressed in a style that they like. And that's fine, but actually that shop is then missing out. It's not their fault. It's our responsibility to make sure that changes, so that we bring younger people in, so that they have that fresh dynamic, that they will then encourage their friends to come in and shop with you if they're volunteering there. They'll encourage their friends to come and give their fashion, their items that they no longer want. And I know very much from my own young people that they're constantly refreshing their wardrobe, far more frequently than I will, or probably most of us. And they've got stuff to give, and they need to give it to your shops. So it's about that, making sure you've got young people there will help not only with the volunteering, but will help with stock generation, and will help with income and profit. And finally, on this point, charity shop teams should reflect the whole of your community. It shouldn't just be about a certain type of people that comes into your shop. You've got that whole community out there, and a lot of them are choosing not to come into the shop because they don't feel it reflects them and their lifestyle. And that's particularly true of young people. And when I first started my project with V Inspired, we did some young people's focus groups. And it was really interesting to hear that, and really sad to hear that about 90% of them weren't actually going into charity shops for those reasons. They don't play the right music, they don't sell the right stuff, the people who are working behind the counter don't have anything to do with my life. Why would I want to volunteer in a place like that? I would feel out of my comfort zone. But the charity shop is missing out. And the final reason why we should be encouraging them is that, unlike any other age demographic, young volunteers are increasing in numbers dramatically. So this slide is taken from a BBC news report that was only produced last week, that says that in the last 5 years, young volunteering has increased by 52%, which is incredible. And in that time, no other group has really shown much change, but the age group for the 16 to 25s has increased by 52%. So it's suggesting that might be a result of the Olympics and the legacy around that, and people getting involved in their communities. But as I say, according to the BBC, that is the statistic that I think we need to take note of. But there's 52% increase, but they are not volunteering in charity shops. Now, I'm really sorry you can't see this slide, but it will be sent to you, so you'll be able to check those numbers. But basically, in the 25 and under age bracket, in that literally in that same 5 years, and this is according to the Charity Retail Association figures, if Robin is still with us, the numbers of young volunteers has dropped in our shops from 15% to 13%. So it was quite small anyway, and it's gone down by 2% in that same 5-year period that young people have been actively increasing their volunteering by 52%. So that proves that we have work to do and we have an opportunity. And again, another slide from the Charity Retail Association showing age diversity amongst charity shop volunteers. So the first bar is paid staff, and the one below is volunteers. So paid staff make up only 6%. Paid staff under 25 and under, make up only 6% of the staff in our shops. And I think that has to change, and I think we've got to actively do something about that. Because like attracts like, as I said earlier, when I started in the Oxfam shop in Reading, and I was the only person under 60, within a year there were about 10 young volunteers, because I'd made it a more interesting place and a more welcoming place for young people. So I think we need to start by thinking about staff and making sure that the staff reflects the community as well. So in terms of our age demographic. So what barriers do young people face? Now the focus groups that I held were looking at young people in Manchester, Leeds and London. So just in 3 key cities. They all said, these 90% of them said, it just isn't cool to go into a charity shop. It's not cool to shop in one, and it's not cool to volunteer in one. And I think, we probably would guess that's what they would say. But they also said that they felt a lack of confidence in thinking about volunteering in that sort of environment. Again, because they didn't feel that it would be particularly welcoming of them. Now, I'm sure in a lot of cases they would be wrong, and that the local people in each of your shops would welcome them, I hope. But that's the impression that they have at the moment before they think about where they're going to volunteer. And they also think they might be rejected because they think, well, I haven't got any skills, I've never worked in a shop, I can't get a job in a high street shop, a commercial shop. Why would I get a job with a charity shop? So they're already feeling quite negative, quite isolated, quite vulnerable. They're feeling rejected. So that doesn't enable them to feel positive about coming to volunteer with you. It's also about access to information. That's something we took seriously at V Inspired in terms of how we worked with young volunteers. So we made sure that the application form was online. And it's so much easier to do that way. So much easier than having application forms and pieces of paper that get lost, that people take away and they don't bring back, and everything else. So this was all set up so they can go onto the website, they could see the shop location, they could just click the button, apply online, fill in their details, it gets sent straight through, no postage costs, nothing else. And that information was there, so they could see where they could volunteer, how flexible the shifts were, and they could see photographs of where they were volunteering. All of those things got over the problem of access to information, knowing, whether it was, where or when or whatever it was that they could get, how they could get involved. Another barrier is that sort of lack of time. And that came back from them because they thought that they could only do sort of a 4-hour shift, and they had to be very specific about the time that they gave. And I think that's something else that charity shops are getting better at, but still need to move in the right direction. In that, we have to be flexible with people. So if they're in between college courses, or they've got 2 hours to spare or whatever, they can come in and they can price up the music, or they can do a bit of visual merchandising. Or actually with social media, if you get the Twitter set up with Hootsuite or whatever you use, they can do it at home. You can set up and you can check the posts that they're about to make, but they can do it at the right times, because with social media there's certain times where people are going to be more active in looking online. So you've got to make sure that that it's going out at the right time, so they can, they don't actually have to be in the shop sometimes to do their volunteering. So you can overcome the barrier of time. Costs is another issue. For young people, if they don't have much money, they're thinking, well, I'm going to have to pay my bus fare, or I'm going to have to, pay out, and I'm going to be out of pocket. So again, it's making it clear that if you do offer to pay bus fares or lunches if they work the day or whatever, you make that information readily available so that they don't feel it's a barrier. And then lack of formal recognition. At V Inspired, on behalf of loads of charities, they offer awards and certificates to volunteers. So they have on their website hundreds of charity shops around the country who accept young volunteers. And then when that young volunteer has worked so many hours, whether it's 10 hours, 30, 50 or 100, they can then apply for a certificate. And that can help them with their university applications, and it can help them with jobs. So it becomes something that can go onto their CV. So there is some formal recognition, there is some payback for those young people who've given their time. So how to diversify your volunteer profile? I think what we need to do is to create roles that young people will be interested in. So rather than just saying we need volunteers, or we're desperate for volunteers in this shop on this day, we need to think a bit more creatively. So how to get those young people interested, because if they just see shop volunteer, then that's not necessarily going to appeal to them. So visual merchandiser, we need a volunteer visual merchandiser. We need an events planner, because maybe you're going to be doing outside events or things within the shop, events around different seasonal themes. You need a social media champion. So you use words and roles that will appeal to them, that they think, actually, yes, I do have those skills, because people like to know exactly what it is that they're going for. And then reflect your volunteer diversity in your publications, with newsletters, volunteering materials. So make sure, if you do have a young volunteer, that they're featured in your publications. So that, again, the thing about young people currently feeling, well, charity shops don't take young people, or young people don't work in them. We need to proactively work to change that perception. And then collect and monitor diversity data from your volunteers. I don't know if anybody does that at the moment, but it's really worth looking at, where volunteers are coming from. So you've got that starting point. And where they're coming from in terms of age or other areas that you want to look at. You can then see if you're making any progress from now onwards. But you can also, when volunteers leave, and especially today, talking about young volunteers, you could ask them why they're leaving. Is there a reason? Is there anything that we could have done differently to encourage you to stay longer? So that you're learning from that and you're making changes so that you will encourage more young volunteers in future. And make sure that when you're advertising for volunteers, you use, new places. You think about where young people are, and you think about how to reach them, what sort of messages you use. And so, universities, every university has a volunteering department, and if you go to them and tell them what you're looking for, then they'll help find volunteers for you. Obviously, you're not all going to be having shops in university places, but local colleges are the same, sixth form colleges, but also social media again young people are on social media all the time, so making sure you get the ask right, but getting it out there on social media. And then make sure that your teams are trained on equality and diversity, so that young volunteers are valued. because there's nothing worse than you investing a huge amount of time, effort, money in creating a plan, a strategy to recruit volunteers and young volunteers, and then when they get met at the shop counter, the person there thinks, we don't really need anybody like that. We want somebody like ourselves. I've heard it so many times. I know why they're doing it, but they need to understand why they shouldn't do it, and that there are benefits to all of them for not doing that. And then finally, get involved in youth volunteering campaigns. There are ones that are out there that you can actually get involved with. So the BBC Radio 1 million hours campaign, I don't know if anybody's familiar with the campaign, but Radio 1, which is all about young people, are working really hard this year to get this 1 million hours, to get young people giving their time and volunteering a million hours. Oxfam do all sorts of interesting volunteer recruitment materials, so their Give a Shift, do you give a shift? Is but it's really, it works, doesn't it? It works, and it definitely works with young people, and that's the sort of thing that will make them smile and think, actually, they're targeting that at me, and I'll go and give my time there. And then with my assistant Warren, this is an Oxfam video on YouTube. Everybody can put stuff on YouTube, but this is Oxfam saying, reflecting one of their young volunteers and what they do. It's just a quick 2 minutes.
So I'm interested in fashion. I run a fashion and art blog. Post-university, I really want to go into fashion journalism. Working in a charity shop really inspires me, just because you never really know what you're going to get on any given day. And just being here has taught me so much about what it means to be into fashion and what it means to be into clothing. People will donate the most beautiful, beautiful things. It's really exciting, actually. Prada, Vivienne Westwood, Salvatore Ferragamo, Burberry always makes appearances. Lots and lots of Jack Wills if you're into that. Lots of Ray-Bans. Do you want to try it on? You know you want to. It's just such a great place to work. All the people are so friendly. It's just a really nice social environment. I've made some really good friends here. Have you ever watched The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe? Whatever you're interested in, there's always a place for you within the shop. You can work anywhere from 1 hour to the entire day if you really wanted to. Oxfam is a place where lots and lots of people can come together and use their interests in different ways to help the shop do really well.
Sorry, I hope you could hear that, but that's a brilliant message. But that's the sort of thing that any charity can do, create, and then publicise it on global channels like YouTube, but making sure it gets out within your local community. So that's the sort of the detail, and then I just wanted to just give you 10 minutes of Be Inspired and what that journey has been like for this youth volunteering charity. So the business objectives for Be Inspired was to open a Be Inspired charity retail operation that would unlock a new revenue stream to support the sustainability of the organisation. Again, it's about securing the future. It's about a new income stream, which is important to all of us. And then to get the charity, because the charity isn't a well-known charity, but to get it onto the high street, to improve its visibility, increase brand awareness as the UK's leading youth volunteering charity. And then finally to offer a unique charity retail experience. And the whole strapline has always been it will be run by young people, for young people. So anybody up to the age of 25 volunteers there. If you're over 25, I'm sorry, you're not welcome, which has been quite a challenge, and I have to hide in the back whenever I go into one of them. But it's all about making sure that it stays very youthful and it reflects young people, and that young people feel very confident. It does obviously restrict the number of volunteers that the shop can take, because they can only take young people, but that's not been a problem. They can have 30 volunteers in a week, and they've had waiting lists, so it's not been an issue. And people who are over 25 get a very good explanation as to why I'm afraid there isn't any vacancy for them and where they could go instead. The first shop opened in Manchester over a year ago, and if anybody knows Manchester, it's Oxford Road, which is where the two key universities are. So there's over 100,000 young people who are up and down that street every day, and the busiest bus route in Europe. So in terms of visibility, it's a good spot. I was really keen to make sure that the design was absolutely cutting edge and youthful. And so what we had to do was to find a designer who would do that for us. And what we had to also do was find a designer to do it at zero cost. So we didn't have a budget. So I had to do a lot of schmoozing of individuals, basically, and then to make this happen. So I went to a brand agency, design agency, that's targeted at young people, and I asked them to do it, and they reduced the cost from 80,000 to 15,000, which was very kind of them. But I said, I'm really sorry, we don't have any money at all. And two of their designers, who were amazing people, said, we'll do it ourselves in our own time. Both really busy, full-time workers, both, one of them with young kids, and based in London. But they did it at zero cost. So, and everything then that we did in terms of the decorating and electricals and all of that was all done with local people. So again, keeping it on as small a budget as possible. So the messaging, so it was called Good Stock. That was, young people chose the name. So again, it was going out to young people saying, what should we call this shop? We had a list of 10 that they came up with, and then there was an online vote, and Good Stock was the winner for that. And then, so it's all themed around good, so do good, and shopping that makes you feel good on the inside and look good on the outside is one of the sort of messages around the shop. It's very clean, it's very white, it's very clinical and a bit quirky. It's a big space. There's a lot more stock in that shop now than what it looks like here. But it's still keeping that very sort of contemporary feel to it. We were fortunate enough to get the companies to do billboard posters for us around Manchester at the time, again without any costs attached. And one of the other things in terms of launching a shop like this was maximising publicity with local young people, because nobody had heard of V Inspired really, and nobody knew Good Stock because it was a brand new concept. So we created a campaign called #LookingGood, and I don't know if Caroline's still here, but that was about making sure you use that hashtag, as she was saying earlier, and get that shared as much as possible. So that was about going out into the streets of the city centre and taking photographs of young people who looked good, and then telling them that we were doing this Looking Good campaign, and that their photograph, with their permission, would appear online with the hashtag Looking Good, and there would be an online vote to see who was Manchester's best dressed. And so that was a really nice campaign. Again, it wasn't an expensive campaign, but it was really good in terms of raising awareness and getting young people interested. And so, sorry, I think it says there we had 182 people entered the competition, and that was done before the shop opened. And then, and these are some of the images that were taken. And then at the shop opening, the back wall just had the hashtag Looking Good, and all of their photographs were stuck on there so that people could then come in and see their photograph. And as I say, that was part of the launch event. So that happened on a very, very snowy late January evening a year ago. So we thought, that's it, nobody's going to come. It was an opportunity to invite young people in, but also to invite the people who'd been supportive of the concept, the corporate supporters and the designers, etc., to come in and to enjoy a celebration of that shop. We also gave out discount cards at the time, so people then could come back and have a 20% discount. So they got a good discount. We had a nail bar, which was done by young people who were training in the local college to be nail technicians. They came and ran a nail bar. We had a local young person's radio station called Unity Radio. They came and were DJing on the night. We had a customisation workshop, so we were doing upcycling as well. And 329 people came out on that snowy evening. And I think we'd thought maybe we'll take 500 or 600 pounds, and they, in that short time, took 1,250 pounds. So it was a great success. There's some of the young volunteers, some of the customers. This was the launch. It's got the shop has got a higher floor where they can do all sorts of other youth focused events, so like the nail bars, like a bit of fringe cutting, DJs. We hire it out for events. We've had gigs in the evening, and I think that whole thing about, you know, these days we have to keep the high street alive. It's not just about 9 till 5, it's what you do beyond that as well. And you're paying your rent for 24/7. You know, if you can find ways to use that space safely and productively, then that's what we do. We had International Women's Day. There was a big art exhibition featuring loads of local women artists, and that raised, I think, about £1,000 because they donated works of art. So we're doing that, you know, and but it's all generated by young people, so they very much have a say in what's going on. For the launch, there were 20 pieces of coverage. 11 of those were online, and that's how it needs to be. So, you know, 9 Manchester fashion bloggers were there. Fashion bloggers are always looking for opportunities. I'm sure some of you have worked with them before, but getting them to come and do stuff within your shop and taking, you know, a bit like what Caroline was doing in terms of taking outfits and pieces and creating a look. You know, that's what they do, and they would like to work with you. You just have to find them online, which isn't too hard. So, and then we had, you know, interviews with third sector, children and young people. Now we had BBC Radio there, fundraising.co.uk did something, and then a big Manchester fashion website, they featured us. And then after that, we've had loads of, you know, celebrities coming into the shop. So, you know, pop stars who might be, you know, in Manchester for something have come in and then tweet about the shop. So it continues to do well. So what's next for Goodstock? It's opened a second shop in London. Really it's about, from a volunteering perspective, keeping that high number, keeping people coming through. As I say, it's all online applications, which is, you know, which works incredibly well for them. We make sure we have a target of getting 80% of those volunteers receiving awards. So they sign up for that and then they receive those awards. And I'm really, really proud to say that so many of them who've come in without any careers, without any work experience, have gone on and got paid work as a result of their volunteering. It does mean that there is a high turnover. It does mean that somebody might only be there for 6 months. But 6 months of time that they give to you with brilliant skills, and then they stay a supporter of the charity afterwards because they've had a great experience. But I don't know of anybody who's gone and worked there, because they're doing it a lot of the time to gain experience, apart from make friends, you know, learn new skills, the other reasons that people do volunteer. But they do want to help their careers and help them decide which direction to go in, and I really think it's been positive in that. The Manchester shop is now collaborating with something called Manchester Youth Market, and so they're bringing in stalls of young people who've got products or services to sell and giving them a chance to sell to the public from the whole Goodstock space, which again is, you know, it's helping develop entrepreneurial skills within young people. But again, it's driving footfall to the shop. So that's something that, and the council are paying the shop to use the space. So it's a real win-win situation for the charity. The Manchester Arndale Centre is very keen to get more young people shopping. You know, young people, there's 40 million people visit the Arndale Centre every year, but they're keen to get more of the student population shopping with them. So they're doing something with the shop to highlight them and what they're about, but the shop is benefiting with stock donations of new clothing. And it's about doing the other stuff, keeping the buzz, keeping it going with events, exhibitions, gigs, etc. So that's it really. Just an example of a shop which is all about young people. And yes, it has challenges, and yes, sometimes people don't turn up if they've had a heavy night the night before, or they've got an exam, or whatever. But generally, it doesn't have any more problems than a traditional charity shop, but creates something which is a real celebration of young people and a real demonstration of their abilities to learn new skills and develop new careers and become great giving people. So that's that. Any questions? Anybody?
Does anyone have any questions for Jayne at all? One at the back, just right at the back there.
It was interesting when you said that the number of volunteers volunteering in charity shops has gone down, and yet the number of young volunteers has gone up. What is appealing to them? What are they volunteering in? So what's grown?
Good question. I think, well, I know sports certainly as a result of the Olympics, there's been a lot of volunteering going on with sports. I don't know actually. I don't know exactly where they're volunteering. I don't know if anybody else knows. I mean, I've just looked at it from a charity retail perspective and seen that they're not. It doesn't look like they're coming through our doors. I think, I mean, just through my own knowledge, without looking at any bigger sort of statistics, I think young people now are doing a lot more sort of the caring types of roles, and certainly within Be Inspired, doing things that are about helping the community, whether that's, you know, volunteering with older people or volunteering with children. There's a lot of very much people focused volunteering that's going on, and I think the environment, certainly from a Be Inspired perspective, I'd say it's very much about people, very much about the environment, in trying to improve their community. Don't know if anybody else has got any other knowledge.
One very quick question. Oh, sorry. Yes, one very quick question. The charity, the event, the Manchester piece. Any paid employees amongst those volunteers?
Yes, I should have said that. Yes, there is one paid manager and a part-time assistant manager, so that there's cover for when the manager's off and the holidays. But other than that, it's all volunteers, and the manager is under 25, obviously. Don't know what happens when she gets to 25. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
Could I just ask you, the Be Inspired project is obviously very attractive. I don't want to offend anybody in the audience. Sometimes in the hospice world, we face a challenge around the image of what a hospice does. And at our hospice, Nottinghamshire Hospice, we want very much to connect our volunteers with the cause. Have you got a top tip of how we might jazz up the concept of hospice to attract young people to our cause?
That's a big one, isn't it? It's not something I've thought of, so I'm sorry not to have a great tip ready for you. But to jazz up the hospice, I volunteer with Clare House. I don't know where Simon is, but I've been involved with Clare House for about 6 years as a trustee, and then on the retail committee. And I know it's something that Simon's always keen to do, I think, and that's obviously a young person's hospice, which is one section of the hospice community. You've got I don't know if there's anybody here from East Anglia Children's Hospice. No. I know that last year they were at the Latitude Festival, as an example. I was there with my son, and they had a brilliant stall that was all about, you know, vintage fashion, pre-loved fashion, and they had celebrities, pop stars, giving them things to sell. So Ed Sheeran, who comes from East Anglia, he'd given autographed shirts and jackets and various bits and pieces. I mean, I think making contact with key people, you know, celebrities and people who will support you is a really good route to go down. I think taking your shop outside to events like that and letting young people know what you do and how vital it is. And you know, I suppose a lot of young people don't necessarily visit hospices as much as other generations. I'm not saying they don't entirely, you know, grandparents and sometimes people of younger generations, but so I think some of it is about breaking down those barriers and getting your shop out into the community where young people are is really, really important, and is something that you can do without changing the whole of your shop. I mean, I think the Good Stock project is about creating something which is aimed pretty much exclusively at young people. Older people do go and shop there. They're allowed to spend money, they're allowed to give, but they're not allowed to volunteer. But it's because it keeps it very much youth focused. And I suppose for you all, what you want to do is open the doors to everybody. It's that reflecting the whole of your community, which I think is really important. So maybe it's about, you know, having a vinyl sale, you know, an event, say twice a year, or you know, having a vintage fashion rail or a vintage fashion window, or doing an event with bloggers, that sort of thing. So you're not about refitting the whole shops, because that's not what you want to do, and that isn't going to solve other issues, is it? But it's about making sure that young people feel, I think it's really important to make sure young people feel welcomed, and you know, maybe getting a young person to walk through the shop and say what they like and what they don't like, and giving you that sort of feedback, and making sort of those sort of incremental changes, rather than just accepting that what you've got and they either like it or lump it sort of thing. So I would, off the top of my head, I would say that, and I'll have a think about it a bit more.
Right, lovely. Thank you very much, Jayne. Thank you.